cannot do it. And sometimes I think it's actionable items. You have to think, what can I do right now to pursue that doesn't take my entire day or overwhelm me? Steps like I was doing where during nap time or after the kids were in bed, I'm just going to play around with a cover for my book.
Welcome back to the Happiness in Progress podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Craig. I'm an Emmy Award-winning journalist, a mom, wife, and you know what I like to say, just a person looking for more joy in the everyday. This podcast is brought to you by the Mail Tribune. You can find more podcasts at mailtribune.com. If you like this podcast, would you do me a favor and just subscribe to it and give it a 5-star rating? I appreciate that so much when you do that. Recently, I read a brand new fiction book that I absolutely loved, and I had to have the author on. And that's who you are going to hear from today, Tracey Barski. She is a mostly stay-at-home mom who lives in Colorado with her husband of 10 years and their 2 children. She wears many hats, working part-time as an editor and proofreader and a sign language interpreter. She published her debut novel, the one I read, The Alternate Ending of Cassidy, Marchand, and she plans to release a second book this fall. So she sat on this manuscript for years. So we're going to talk about why she didn't release it, some of those limiting beliefs that she had, and how she overcame some self-doubt and works on that with her writing continually. We also talk about prioritizing her writing, even though she is a busy stay-at-home mom of 2, and what it feels like to put herself out there, and a whole lot more. So let's get to it. Tracey, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, let's talk about your desire to become an author. When did you know you wanted to do that?
It was kind of, I don't know if I just spent my whole life talking myself out of being an author, but
Wow.
I've been writing since I was in middle school. Um, but I think at one point I thought if I pursued being an author, then it would suck the fun out of something I enjoy doing.
Mm,
Um, and I don't know, I was really self-conscious of my writing, so it was hard to share it with people. So for a long time, I just did it for myself. And um, I think after I started sharing my writing with people and getting a lot of really positive feedback about it and encouragement to pursue it, that I started considering it. But then I thought, I'm a mom with little kids and I don't have the time or the energy or the money to put into any of it, and just put it on a back burner for a long time. But I think secretly I've always wanted to publish, but it was a lot of self-doubt holding me back, I think. So,
oh yeah,
yeah.
you just listed so many limiting stories. Everything from I won't like it anymore to I'm a mom. How did you, first of all, since you've published your first book, do you still feel like you like writing? Did it take the enjoyment out of it?
It did not, although it does add a certain level of pressure
Yeah.
because I've gotten a huge positive response from it, that now I feel like it matters that my second book is just as good, if not better. And so that I'm paranoid it's not going to be, but I still really enjoyed the process of writing the second book a lot more than I thought I would. And but there is just a level of stress that comes with it, thinking
Right.
I have to make sure it's on par with this book that I had years to improve upon whenever I felt like it. And now I'm on a timeline and I'm a little bit afraid.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. You also mentioned, I'm a mom. What have you learned about your ability to be a mom and also do something you love and do something for you and follow a dream?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I learned how to prioritize myself at various points during the day, even if that means 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there. Um, but then also trying to focus on the time that I'm not spending writing or doing housework, to really be intentional with my kids when I
Hmm.
have that time. So I feel like it's taught me how to be intentional about my various roles, being a
Hmm.
mom, being a wife, being a writer. Um, and I've just, Yeah, it really forces you to prioritize and set time aside for each of those things. I mean, I kind of don't have a choice when it comes to my children. I have to feed them and make sure they stay alive. And sometimes that means on any given day that I don't get any writing done, but that's okay too, you know. But yeah, I think just realizing that I don't have to spend all of my time and energy on my children just because they are still young. I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. Um, and teaching them the boundaries as well, saying, this is my time. You guys can, here's your activity or here's a show. No guilt there. Watch a show when you need a break. And I am a better mom because of it too. And
Mhm.
they learn to give me space to be something other than just mom. So
Mhm.
I think it's good for everybody all around.
And I like too that you, by setting your own boundary, you're teaching them how to set boundaries for themselves. And someday they'll be able to do that for themselves.
Hmm.
So what does that look like? Because I think there are a lot of moms who listen to this podcast who are also trying to do their side hustle or whatever it is, whether it's writing or something else. Do you set aside a certain amount of time, or what is your goal for the day when you enter a new day, as far as when you're going to get that writing in or how much you're going to get in?
I kind of know what our week looks like. I don't always, but I usually after lunch, my 2-year-old goes to her room to hopefully take a nap, but she has not been doing that every day. But
She
she
has her
likes to
own
play.
opinions now. That happens at
Yes.
2.
And luckily she's somewhat introverted, or at least she seems to be, because she will play in her room happily. I'll just go put her in her room. She plays or sleeps, whichever one. It doesn't matter because I don't have to worry about her. And my 5-year-old, he is starting to actually play by himself a fair amount. Yeah.
Okay, so you wrote a book, and
Yes.
then what? It just sat on your computer for years? Tell me about this.
Yeah. So I wrote the book, the book. I mean, I've written other books that were not worth seeing the light of day, honestly, but this one I felt pretty good about, and I'd had a couple of friends read and gave me feedback, and that was really helpful. And then kind of sat on it for a little while, then I let a few other people read it, and I would go back to it and kind of read through it and refine it, I guess, as I was going. And then just periodically random people would read it. I finally let my mom read it a couple years ago, and she loved it. Um and every time I would let someone read it, they were just crazy with the praise. I mean, of course, I'd get feedback like this is confusing or whatever, and that was really helpful. But just the kinds of things I was getting, and it was giving me a lot of joy getting to share a story with people that I came up with. And um, yeah, and last year I joined a Facebook group called Moms Who Write, and it was such an amazing resource because tons of these women had published their own books. And there are some traditionally published authors in the group as well as indie authors, and they just talked about the process, and I thought, well, maybe I could do this. And I had gotten a couple of what they call beta readers from some writing groups where they read through your book before you publish it or do anything with it, and they give you critiques and feedback on various things, and they all were really positive as well. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll just give it a go, I guess. And so last November I was playing around with covers for
Mhm,
this book.
mhm.
Ended up liking the cover that I made, and I was like, actually, this would be really cool if I just put it out in the world. Even if 5 people buy it and they're all my family members, it would be cool.
Mhm.
So I decided to do it, and it was kind of on a whim, and then it's turned into a whole thing. So,
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna
yeah.
talk more about the whole thing, but first, what do you think? I mean, you've said now that you've sat on several books, and several
Mhm.
books and stories you've not shared. But what do you think? Was there a reason that you know, didn't share it initially? Was there any self-doubt around it or anything like that? Or you just didn't occur to you?
It was a lot of self-doubt. There's an element of writing that is such a, um, kind of personal thing. I've dabbled in a lot of different kinds of creative outlets and arts, and I performed as a singer, and I've been on stage in plays, and I would draw and things like that, and I didn't have as much self-doubt and self-consciousness with sharing any of that, but there's something about writing that feels so much more of my internal thought process and how my brain works, that it felt so much more vulnerable to let people read it.
Mhm.
And um so I was just afraid for a really long time. So and then I slowly started sharing it with a couple of people, and not only did I find joy from, hearing really the positive things, but I also got so much from their feedback of things to improve, that it really makes me kind of excited sometimes to have people read to give me critiques and feedback, because it makes me better.
Mhm.
And there were so many things I didn't even know that I tended to do that were not great writing habits, that now I'm aware of and I can do so much better. And I love that
Yeah.
about it, now that I get to share it with more people, and especially different minds, that things that you think make sense doesn't make sense to someone reading it, and it's interesting how people's brains process things, and I don't know, but yeah, there was a lot of self-consciousness with sharing anything that I'd ever written. It's
Yeah,
very
and
scary.
what you're talking about, I think it just feels good to grow, like progress in something. It
Mhm.
feels good to become a better writer and to be able to
Yeah.
put into practice these different constructive criticisms that you're getting. That's really cool.
Mhm.
Okay, so you get the beta readers, they're liking it, you're feeling better, and you get this book published. Does that self doubt and self consciousness come back?
Yes, all the time, especially if I know of someone who's reading it, who, I hold them in some kind of high esteem. Um, there was a girl that I've now become friends with, who she's a prosecutor here in Colorado, and I was so afraid for her to read it, because there's some elements of legal stuff, and um she's a really smart person, or a couple of other people I know who are really, just really cerebral people, and I was thinking, "Oh my gosh, they're gonna think it's terrible, they're gonna rip it apart," and, so it seems like every few weeks, whenever someone's like, "Oh, I bought your book," I'm like, "Oh, okay. I hope you like it." And I hold space for the fact that not everyone likes every book.
Yeah, right.
Books that I absolutely love, there are people who absolutely hate them, and I get that, and I'm not offended by those kinds of things, but I am afraid for that day when someone rips it apart, and, um but so far it hasn't happened, but I'm always kind of waiting for it to
Y-
happen sometime
Yeah,
soon,
I think you're
especially
your
when it's
own worst
people.
critic.
Yes, and especially when it's people that I feel like there's something about them that I look up to them in some way.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it
How do
it doesn't
you
go away.
how do you work through those self-doubt feelings, especially as you're writing the second book?
Um, I mean, I remind myself of the fact that, because I find it interesting to go and read the reviews of books
Mhm.
that I've absolutely loved, and read the negative ones, to remind myself that even these ones that I think are fantastic, somebody else thought was terrible. And like I said, not every book is for every person, and that's okay, and I have to remind myself of those facts. Um and that it's got to happen someday, where somebody's just not going to like it. But and then I'm kind of good at compartmentalizing. I kind of panic for a moment when somebody says they're going to read my book, and then I'm like, there's nothing I can do about it now. I put it out in the world for people to read. That means I have to be open to the harshness of differing opinions. So
Mhm.
I don't know.
I really like that you do this thing where you read You read other people's comments, negative comments about other books, because you are absolutely right. We're not going to be for everybody. We never will. I learned this when I realized when Angelina Jolie was chosen as like people's sexiest woman, or is it sexiest
Mhm.
woman? I know it's sexiest
Uh,
man. Anyway, like it was
uh,
like people's women, like best woman ever. And I was like,
yep.
I've got some beef with Angelina Jolie. And that just helped me realize like, oh my gosh, like I'm judging her, even though so many people love her. We just can't be for
Mhm.
everybody. I love that tangible tip of going to read that even some of the best books, they have really negative comments. It doesn't matter how good
Yeah.
they are.
Yeah.
New York Times bestsellers.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. It's mind-boggling sometimes to see the huge difference in opinions about stuff like that. So
mhm.
it
We
is
can't be for
helpful.
everyone. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So you talked a little bit about the pressure with the second book. How have you worked through that pressure?
Letting people read it and give me feedback. Um, and knowing this is something I've told a few friends who aren't as far into their writing or publishing journey. Um, because I've had people say, this, this part of your writing is really amazing, or I love how you just have such well rounded or really clear, sharp characters. And I was talking to someone who she's written her first book, and she's new to the whole thing. And I explained to her, I was like, that is several times reading through, fixing things. Like the product initially is not the finished product. And remembering that and giving yourself grace in that in between period, that you improve in all this time, and all of the extra flavor that comes into that is a process of going through over and over and over again, refining and fixing and making it better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I remind myself that I have the opportunity to still do that.
Yeah.
Once I get the feedback from people, because I have it with beta readers right now and a couple of critique partners. And so I'm getting the feedback that's going to make it better, and then I'm going to have the opportunity to go through and make it better. So I know that it's not where it needs to be, and it's supposed to not be where it's supposed to be. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? It's not
Mm-hmm.
the final product yet. And but it is helpful that I have gotten a lot of positive feedback from my critique partners as well. They have,
Mm-hmm.
their criticisms and stuff that really helps, but then at the end of it, they're still blown away and excited, and they think it's really great, and that's helpful too. So I get a lot of, you have your critique sandwich where you give something positive, something to work on, and then something positive. And I feel like the people I've chosen to read it are good at doing those things. So
Are there mindset tools that you have learned in the writing process that have been helping you in your regular day-to-day life?
that's a great question. I don't know.
Just as you're talking,
um
you're just sharing so much of mindset tools that would help
yeah,
in the day-to-day.
I mean, those are kind of things that I have already done in
Mm-hmm.
life, that
Mm-hmm.
are not that I sort of applied to writing. I
Mm-hmm.
think um, I am kind of a natural compartmentalizer. I will start to panic or get stressed about something, and I will tell myself, I cannot control this thing.
Yeah.
Yes, it is a stressful situation, but I cannot change it. And therefore, by worrying about it, I'm just going to make myself feel awful and still not change the situation. And so I've just always been good at kind of like, okay, stress about this thing and then set it aside and focus
Yeah.
on what I can do and what I can control. Um, I don't think I've mastered the art of not worrying about whether other people always like me or not,
Mm-hmm.
even though I have that kind of running script in my head for my book. Um, I am a little bit of a people pleaser, so I don't like it when people don't like me. But um, But I do know that that's out of my control as well, and not everyone has to like me, just like I don't like every person I've ever met. Sorry to the people that I've met that I don't like. You probably don't know who you are, but that's okay. Um, but that's a work in progress too, making sure that I let go of the things that I can't do anything about it. So,
hmm What would you say to other stay-at-home moms who are listening who have some kind of dream in their head or book on their computer or whatever it is, who haven't taken the action?
um, probably one of the first things is finding out why you're not pursuing it. What things are you telling yourself or believing about why you're not doing it? Um, and then asking yourself why not.
hmm
um, those are big things for me. Um, why not? Why not do it? And sometimes I think it's actionable items. You have to think, what can I do right now to pursue that that doesn't take my entire day or overwhelm me? Steps like I was doing where during nap time or after the kids were in bed, I'm just going to play around with a cover for my book. It doesn't take that much time, it doesn't take that much money, anything like that. Just the small steps to get you there, and just decide to do it, I guess.
hmm
So,
hmm I
I don't
love
know.
that.
Those would be my biggest things probably.
I love the questioning why not, and then moving forward with small actionable steps. So tell me about your book. Tell me about the whole thing.
What
Just give
specifically?
us
Like
just give
where
us a little synopsis. I just read it. I loved it. And I'm waiting for the next one. And I found out our mutual friend is getting it
Yes.
tomorrow.
She
And
told
I was
me
like,
about
are you kidding?
that.
So
To be
tell me
fair,
a little.
she read my book, the first one, 2 years ago
Mhm.
too. So, I mean,
She
she
had to wait a
kinda
long time. And
yes.
she's really good at spell check. Okay, so tell us the synopsis. Tell the listeners the synopsis of your book.
Alrighty. Well, the main character, Cassidy Marchand, um, she's basically alone in life, kind of a bitter, angry individual who is on the run from an abusive ex-boyfriend and gets picked up for pickpocketing. And while she's in jail, she gets transported to an alternate reality of her own life in which she has been killed by a serial killer. So, in this alternate reality, she has to figure out how to get home, who killed her other self, and how to deal with all the people that were not in her life in this other reality and now they are, and the drama that ensues with, a father who was never there in her life and friends she had never met before. So, yeah, it's kind of adventure and a learning experience for her. So,
Can you tell us about the synopsis of the second book, or does it give away the big whoa moment from the end of the first?
it gives it away a
Maybe
little
you just
bit.
have to read the first book and then you'll be hooked for the
Yes,
second one.
yes.
All right. I
Yeah.
like I like to ask all of my listeners what their number one tip is for finding more joy in the good, the bad, and the in between.
That's a really hard question to answer, but also something that's really good. I think the little things for sure. Sometimes all you have are the little things, like the huge hug that your kiddo gives you and tells you how much they love you, or um, being thankful. I like to list the things I'm grateful for in the mornings so that I start my day with a heart of gratefulness. I don't know, that I get to enjoy my coffee every
Mm-hmm.
morning, whether it's hot or cold, after being distracted by my children. That I have children. We struggled with infertility for a while. So the fact that I have children at all, even when they frustrate the heck out of me, is something I can find joy in. So I think the little moments and remembering the good things, even when you're in the middle of something really hard,
Mhm.
is or reminding yourself of your blessings is
Mhm.
kind of where I can get some joy.
I love that.
So,
And so many of those things you mentioned, we take for granted if we're not focusing on them. So I love taking the
mhm.
moment to focus on it. Thank you so
Yeah,
much, Tracey, for coming on the podcast.
sure. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Tracey and maybe feel a little push to follow your own dreams and goals, regardless of what those limiting beliefs are. Of course, as always, you can find Tracey's information in show notes. And I want to remind you, you can get your own copy of the Hip Habits Workbook. It is a 6-month workbook filled with 6 months of weekly habits, ranging from everything, including physical wellness to financial wellness and mindset tips, as well as mindfulness tips. That and a whole bunch more in that workbook. And I want to thank you for being here on Happiness in Progress.